Good afternoon, good morning, good evening. Welcome to EIG's 45th webinar, Practical AI, a fireside chat focused on financial services in FinTech. We appreciate that you're taking your time to attend Enhance International's webinar with DataSpeckle and Fusemachines on building evolving resilient enterprise, especially in light of the power outage in BC and all the things happening there and the COVID restrictions. So we have a couple risk events here. This is the sixth webinar in our series on Practical AI for Business. Our first webinar focused on OCR, our second focused on image insight, and then we went into video. And then our last fireside chat was more focused in general on practical AI approaches. And what we thought today is that we would focus on financial services in FinTech. Again, we look forward to this being an interactive webinar consisting of audience polling questions. Please do have your cell phone handy and feel free to ask questions at any time in the chat room or in the Q&A. We'll be getting to your questions as soon as we can throughout the webinar.
Right. Don't wait till the end.
Don't wait to the end. Again, my name is Jim Vries, founder president of Enhance International Group. We're a group of passionate experts to guide transformations. EIG is an exchange of over 50 consultant companies and SaaS providers. And EIG serves as that master integrator to provide you the access to the best and brightest companies like these two companies, Fusemachines and DataSpeckle. We're dedicated to empowering your organization's workforce by leveraging EIG's partner tenured expertise. Our goal is to provide collective, collaborative, experienced thought leadership to enable organizations to deliver self-sustaining, self-funding, positive margin growth, the competitive advantage, focusing on 90-day action plans. Just upcoming webinars, we'll have a webinar in the first week of December, December 7th, on supply chain risk and resiliency to talk about risk events like what we're having today. And we'll also have a fireside chat on new product development on December 9th on leveraging Agile for ideation and phase gate for execution. Next year, we will have webinars on going back to the digital twin, and I'm sure we'll be back here with another fireside chat. And so all these webinars are free. It can be found on EIG's consulting eig.com website. And we're very fortunate to have today two fantastic leaders, very respected leaders in the AI world, Dr. Bülent Uyaniker and Carol Bunevich. Dr. Uyaniker, would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Thank you very much, Jim. Thank you. I'm so happy to be together with you. And my name is Bülent Uyaniker. I'm a physicist, as many of you know, and we are running a small operation here called DataSpeckle, and in collaboration with EIG, Enhanced International Group, as well as Fusemachines. We provide on-demand data science teams to companies to solve their artificial intelligence, machine learning, computer vision, and natural language processing needs. We are running schools, we are running webinars, and at the same time, we're trying to solve many of those problems. We would be more than happy to chat with any of you regarding your FinTech and financial services needs in AI. Thank you very much. I'm really thankful to everyone. First of all, Jim, to organize all this, Carol, to help with all these business experience, and most of all, obviously, all of you joining to this webinar. This is making everything possible, because without you, I think it would not make sense any webinar. So thank you very much.
Good day, because I never know where people are, and I think we probably have people in almost every time zone. I'm C. Bunevich, or Carol. I tell people in the last century I was Carol, but I wanted to mix it up and change my name for the new century, so I turned into C. I am VP of Partnerships at Fusemachines. Fusemachines is an AI consulting, talent, and education company. So all things AI. Before joining Fusemachines in 2015, I had a long career in financial services, primarily what's known as on the sell side. I was a partner and founder of Britton Hill, a boutique broker-dealer focused on the wild world of fixed income and structured products in the O's. If you read the book or saw the movie The Big Short, you will understand the world I lived in for the first decade of the 21st century. It was quite exciting. And you feel free to ask questions about that too, and I'll be glad to share my point of view. Jim?
Great. Thanks, C, and thanks, Bülent. With that, C, our agenda.
Sure. Well, Jim went through this quickly. I'll just repeat. These are the different areas that we have spoken about this year. The first one was focused on OCR, which we believe is the first step to digital transformation. And then we moved into image to insight and video to insight, focusing on computer vision. And we once again did a video insight for safety, once again focusing on computer vision and deep learning. And then our last webinar was Practical AI, a fireside chat. And today we're going to continue with that and focus on fintech and financial services. And next year we will pick out other industries to focus on in 2022. Thank
Great.
you.
Well, you want to give us a history lesson here? You're on mute.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm not intending to give you a history lesson, but this was actually quite fun when we were just talking about taxes and alcohol and all these kind of things. Alcohol actually came later on because we wondered which came first, and that was actually the poll question today we had. Taxes are really interesting because it seems like taxes are in place since 6000 BC, and we were wondering what was the first product that has been taxed. And according to our research, it turns out that anything that is coming from outside, and an import product actually was the first item taxed in 6000 BC around in Middle East. This is probably one of those engravings on stone just depicting the tax situation, and they were using abacus, some sort of counting device just to figure out what was coming inside, because at the time what is coming from outside was a lot more interesting and more taxable. Apart from that, we were able to figure out that land was one of the most important properties that has been taxed for the first time, because wars must be financed, and that was the best way to do this. And then actually we have found a couple of other things, other interesting things that simply made calculations and mathematics a lot easier in terms of finances at the same time. On the right-hand side at the upper panel, we do see a machine which is called a mechanical computer, so to say. It was a difference machine that that was the brainchild of Charles Babbage. He lived around 18th century, and it was very interesting because he came up with those ideas of differencing machines that were simply taking the differences of numbers, but he never built one of them. So the one that we see on that picture over here is built around 2002, like 150 years after his original idea. And this machine is just taking two numbers and taking the differences of these machines with 8,000 different moving parts in this, and it approximately is 11 feet long and 5 tons weighing. So that's actually a very interesting idea, but this is beginning of automatic computing machines and engines. And that's actually one of the things that we don't know whether this is being used for taxes or not, but that's one of the interesting things. On the lower panel, we do see the famous ENIAC, the electronic numerical integrator and computer. It was the first programmable electronic general purpose digital computer that was made around 1945. And it was actually, interestingly, Turing complete and able to solve a large class of numerical problems through reprogramming. So it could be reprogrammed. And that is actually bringing us to the origin of the taxes. And when we just looked for the alcohol, obviously alcohol came a lot earlier than taxes. Okay, that's the history lesson if you want, but actually I did not.
And everybody now use some kind of ERP and enterprise resource planning computer. A lot of us use that to now calculate taxes, to track our financials. So we've moved all the way into where now we can't do business without these computers, but it's a long history.
Well, the good thing with that is actually any calculation, even a difference in calculation, can be made within minutes with the mechanical computer. When it just comes to the ENIAC, the electronic machine, it was actually able to finish the calculations in 30 seconds that took a human approximately 20 hours. And that's being used by military a lot and in many other places as well. So that's actually somehow showing the development and the speed that we are able to achieve. Nowadays, obviously, any of the cell phones that we are using are a lot more powerful than these machines in many respects.
All right, well, thanks, Bülent. That was a great history lesson. So with that, I think we'll get started with the agenda.
Sure. So we're going to start off by talking about the best approaches to solving AI problems in finance. Why we started with fintech and financial services, we'll mention that. And then, as most of you know who've listened to our other webinars or watched, data is the key to success. And so we'll talk about data. Next, we'll talk about planning the tech stack. Next, and then we'll figure out what are the best algorithms to use. And finally, we'll talk about the practical applications.
All right, let's get into it. So we pulled up this McKinsey report of where AI is being used. And McKinsey, does a fine job of summarizing finance and accounting areas that are highly automatable and to provide the greatest opportunity. You can see that from top to bottom in this slide. So from simple machine learning and growth into areas where AI can provide you value when you become hindered in automating high volume, high risk areas due to different constraints that you may encounter. The most proven areas, of course, are in that transactional and financial data flow, and central services are really the best place to start. The high volume financial services processes such as procure to pay, order to cash, cash applications, revenue management, things like this are typical areas to start in a company. Of course, trading, a lot of the traders are using different applications in this area and been using it for many years. One area that I kind of when I was in the company, we always wanted to focus on taxes, but as it turns out, the tax codes are very complicated, and it's more of an expert system type of an application. So it may not be the best place to start, although there's a lot of pain in that area. The key to start is to have, obviously the greatest challenges such as receivables, cash flow, anywhere you're interacting with employees and making decisions and helping make those decisions easier is also a very good place to start. And McKinsey survey says there on the right there, that research indicates that 42% of finance activities are fully automatable using currently demonstrated technologies, and another 19 that are mostly automatable. So the one thing I would encourage you is there's things like robotics process automation, machine learning, some simple things that can be done, and the data cleansing part of it. It pays to try to do that first, to crawl, walk, run before you get into more complicated AI applications. So we often use AI to augment that foundation that's already been built. Bülent C, any other comments on this slide?
No, I think you did a good job, but start simple is always, pick a simple task, not the most complex.
Yeah. Okay. Another thing this slide was just put together. First of all, you see the highlighted AI journey. Where he's talking about digital twins, process simulation. But after that, you see machine learning, OCR, natural language processing, deep learning. These things are things that you could do at any time. So natural language programming, all these things are things that you can do, but they're kind of accredited. So look, do the crawl, walk, run, understand your data, build it out. But all the areas, in a typical company are areas where you can find applications. Bülent, see?
Well, I would just say, pick up a serious pain point, figure out where people are frustrated, and then see if that is adaptable to an AI solution.
Okay.
That's correct. Yes. I think the most important thing that we need to be looking for is whether a problem is AI-able. I don't know if this is a real term or not, but whether you can apply the techniques of AI for any specific problem or not. And on the whole, when we just talk about business, I think for the business purposes, the most important outcome of any exercise, any AI, is the prediction of the activity related to machines, customers, or business health or revenue. I think the problem should be addressing those points as a main outcome of AI. And the second thing is the automation of processes. If there's anything that is manual and that's repetitive, and if you would like to automate that, AI is the best way to go with, especially machine learning or natural language processing techniques. And there are a couple of others, including computer vision.
And we'll get into those more in detail. So just want to set the stage with these couple slides before we get into the next slide, the problem statement in the business case.
Yeah.
See?
So sure, at Fusemachines, we came up with our own terminology for how to know if you have an AI-ready project, and we call it the ADER method. A stands for algorithm. So are there algorithms to work with? Is there something you can build upon, or do you have one you've already created, or are you willing to try to create a new algorithm? But you've got to make sure that you have a problem that lends itself to be solved with an algorithm. We're doing ADER. So I is next, impact. So one of the things you want to make sure, because you're going to spend time and money to come up with a solution, it has to be a significant impact. So I always say that you want bang for the buck. If you're going to spend 3 to 6 months coming up with a solution, you want it to really make a difference. So we always look for what the return on investment is going to be before we make a decision to go forward. D stands for data. And as I say to people, 80% of your outcome is going to be based on your data. So it's all about the data. And Jim was stating earlier that preparing your data is the key to a successful journey. And very often we'll work with clients for 6 to 9 months on data preparation before we actually begin to solve an AI problem. So anything you can do in your business to think data smart from the beginning is going to help you on your AI journey. We often work with young companies, just helping them figure out what data to collect, how to collect it, how to tag it. so that when they're ready to start their AI journey, they've done a good portion of the work before they start. So I can't reiterate enough how important the data element is to your AI journey. And lastly, in our ADA framework, R stands for recurrence. You want things, you want to solve problems where they're going to keep recurring. Why? Because recurring problems produce more data. And as you apply the additional data to your solution, right, to your models, you're going to get better and better answers. So that's why you don't want a problem that just only occurs once. You want a problem that you're coming in contact with regularly so that you're going to be collecting data regularly. Any comments, questions?
Are questions in the chat?
Oh, somebody said, can we elaborate on the data challenges? I'll do that now and again later. Okay. So in financial companies, we're going to talk about this later. Data is in many places in the organization. Financial organizations, larger ones, are naturally siloed. It's just the nature of how they are. They don't like areas talking to one another. So each area has their own data and their own data systems. And because in financial services, you've had so many mergers over the last 24 years, nobody even does a proper audit ahead of time to see whose systems are going to be able to work with whose systems. They don't do that. And then they're married and they go, oh my God, how are we going to work together? So we'll talk more about this later, but this is a key problem in financial services more than in other areas.
And it's really a lead into the next slide. So it's a great question.
And another thing on that data challenges is, I think the prime data challenge is where you don't have data and you think you have it. And that is the,
Right.
that is the most important challenge that you,
Yeah.
because that's actually can be combined together with the quality of the data. So you have something, you have collected things, but that is not usable data. And that's a very important prime and starting problem of AI.
Bülent, here's another question that just came up. How do companies usually select and prioritize their first AI project in finance after they've done the data? So let's say they've done a good job and they actually have cleansed their data and they've got their data. What's a good way for companies to start thinking about the selection process? Maybe we should go back to Jim's slide.
Sure, we can. I'm not going to answer this question from the perspective of an AI practitioner. I think it would make a lot more sense if we answer this question from the perspective of a business person. My approach would be, this is something that we have exercised with so many different clients. My preference would be defining the problem as good as possible, isolating the problem, and really focusing on one single problem to solve with a fallback mechanism. With fallback mechanism, what I mean is we try to come up with an algorithm, with an approach, and at the end, no matter what we do, even the AI algorithm, the machine learning algorithm does not serve the purpose, the originally intended purpose. It should have some sort of a fallback mechanism, whether it could be collecting the data in the right way, in the right place, just securing the data. Somehow there should be a fallback mechanism for a plan B, if you want to say it, if you want to call it that way, and to try to define the problem and make it as small as possible and just solve the problems with smaller and little chunks one by one. I think that is the most efficient way of approaching AI problems.
A question came in. What are some of the tools that people are using today to prepare their data?
They use a lot of data mining tools to clean the data. So they're using enterprise information management, first of all, which is a slide that we'll get to in a few minutes. And they're doing cleansing and they're setting data governance. So a lot of the data mining tools out there, like Alteryx and others, help you find out how clean your data is. So when you pull down your data and you pull it out of your system, you find out what percentage of that data is actually usable that you can make a decision with? What is the percentage that doesn't make sense? That is, and what fields do you have in there that you think people are filling out and they're not filling out? So that due diligence should be done up front, and you can do that right away on the field, the data tables that you have in your company.
To add on that and to be more specific, it looks like Excel is the prime tool and the most important tool that companies are currently using in order to gather data, clean data, sort their data, or just use it. We have seen so many enterprise level companies that are still using Excel. And we're not saying that. It has nothing to do with actually the availability of the tools. It has something to do with the culture, the way that you have the talent, the way you are just processing the data. I think Excel is the one that people are most using. This is not surprising, considering that only 20% of available businesses are adopting AI in their daily business routines.
All right. Well, let's move on to the next slide, because I think this will create a lot more questions. This was done by Analytics Week by their executive team, and they put together a overview on the backbone, of where we're having AI adoption challenges in the finance industry. So we thought we would leverage this information. They did a great job of putting this together. It's a great article. You can just Google. And the first one on here is this model interpretability. And, this is about, in AI, we have things like deep learning, which is more probabilistic. We have machine learning, which is more deterministic. Right. And in finance, especially in finance, you have to be able to track everything through regulators, auditors, and internal stakeholders. Everybody wants to see the trail. You always are asked, how did you come up with that? You have to be able to create that trail. And then deep learning, you're using more probabilities. And it's real big in fintech, but it's hard for the accountants to, grab onto that. So, exactly. So this is one of the churns that go through the company is, can we trace it? Do we have the paperwork? My wife, who's a banker, everything has to be in paper. So we have copies of everything like we're in a bank, because that's how she grew up. And I think that's a lot of what's going on now is, how do we move to a more automatable environment, although we have so many transactions, but there has to be an audit trail in order to be regulated and meet all the requirements of the FCC and so forth. So that's a challenge for many companies, and the mindsets of many companies on the openness to adopt AI. So that we thought was very interesting. Well, was there a question there that came in?
No, we're ready to go forward.
So you want to choose another one, or the next one, of course, is data availability and quality.
Right.
AI is, it's obvious as data, you need data, and the more data you have, the better decisions you can make, the more confident you can be in making a decision when you have more data. So that's another big piece of this. And in the financial world, there's lots and lots of transactions, so it should be fairly good to get that. But again, as C brought up and Bülent brought up before, you have these silos where you have lots of data, but they're in different tables. The tables aren't joined. When you join them, they don't. There's a lot of work that needs to be done to create that. So that's all in that data governance that we would, encourage you to try to understand what that is before you get deep into trying to apply AI. Bülent, see, you want to take another one of these that's favorite to yours?
I would just comment to reiterate what you said. in the world of finance, you've got the bean counters and you got the traders, and they don't see the world in the same way, yet they're both in finance. And for the bean counters, machine learning will work for them, and it is working for them, but deep learning will not,
Right.
because they want explainable AI. And really, deep learning isn't explainable in that way. It's, as Jim said, it's based on probabilities and statistics, and it's not exact. So it works for the traders. And as you probably all know, traders have been using algorithms probably for 30 years to trade, Bülent, right? I mean, it's a long time.
Oh, yeah, in the 90s started, yeah.
Yeah, it's a long time since people have been using algorithms for trading, and very successfully.
Yeah, they all said that the algorithms will take over and the stock exchange will fall, but it's still standing.
Right.
Yeah, one of the main challenges I would like to mention, there are a couple of actually, and this is a very nice list because in the background, our team worked quite nice just to compile all this. I think it's the cost and time to benefit. I think that's one of the interesting challenges, because many people, many businesses that we are talking with, they try to figure out how much will that cost, whether we have the talent, whether it's doable, because they don't know about the AI algorithms. They hear about the benefits, but they don't know. And the second thing is the time frame. How long will it take for me to benefit from an AI algorithm that I apply to my problem? I think these things are the very important things that are really determining factors. And the other one is maybe the reliability in AI. So these 2 points, just as an addition to, you already mentioned the other topics, I think these are really important factors in adopting the AI for businesses.
Yeah, we'd love to hear from our audience here if there are any of these that resonate with them and what they're seeing in their organization of challenges that they're facing.
Well, we also have this as a question later on.
Yeah, so think about that. Screenshot this and think about areas that you're facing, and we'll talk about ways to overcome those challenges.
Well,
go ahead, see.
no, this is your slide.
Yeah, so I just quickly wanted to mention this slide just because it has some statistics on it, and it just reinforces what we've been saying are the real challenges for AI. You see the quality there, that about half the time we have data quality issues. So that's why we keep bringing it up. And there's that well curated data to train an AI system. That's the number one issue, and the data governance. And this is taken from many different surveys. This one from 518 global folks in AI in October 2019. So and it was done by Forrester on behalf of IBM. So these are the challenges that everybody's having. I don't think it's changed in the last 2 or 3 years. It's probably, as data has increased, it keeps getting more and more, and we're starting to see more and more of a focus and push on data governance. But this is the challenge that most companies are having. Just wanted to make the point that you're not alone.
Right.
And I'll move right on to the next slide with C.
Sure. Once again, we're back to data, but what are the issues in overcoming hurdles to AI deployment in banking? Once again, we'll start with the obvious, what I already brought up, which is the siloed data. Because if your institution is going to have a successful project, you can't just use data from one part of the organization. You're going to have to figure out how to get people to work together. And one of the things I advise companies is you have to elevate the value of data to the C-suite. And too many organizations have not yet done that. So in my mind, you're going to have more success when you have a chief data officer, and that chief data officer is actually sitting in the C-suite, so that everybody understands how valuable data is, that it's just as important as marketing, finance, sales, that it's
And
key.
IT.
Yeah, it's key.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So the other thing is, obviously, we've talked about this before. I'll reiterate, it's the availability and the quality of the data, which is why we say to people, data first. Work on your data before you pick your project out, because your models require that you have quality, trusted data. You can't really have a good model without that. So the other thing we might mention is there's a whole sub-industry of machine learning operations or machine learning ops now. Just like in software development, you've got DevOps. Well, now there's sort of a subset of that called ML ops. And that is being used effectively in large and small organizations to basically meet some of your data challenges. And then lastly, and we'll probably talk about this again, when you're in finance, you've got to be worried about security and compliance. Just, I mean, I would say in healthcare and in finance, security and compliance are at the highest level in the organization. Not that they don't matter in other organizations, but in my experience, the respect that security and compliance have in really post 2008-9, when the reason the world blew up was because people weren't listening to their compliance people. And compliance people knew that there were problems and they didn't get the respect. And then you saw the results. And so today, compliance people have a lot more respect in the world of finance, and they've been elevated, and that's good. I mean, that's good for consumers, that's good for the institution, it's good for everybody. And there are all kinds of new regulations today that didn't exist, right? We have some of these listed: SOC 2, Type 2, HIPAA, GDPR, and in California, CCPA. This is all really good for the consumer. And if it's good for the consumer, it's ultimately good for the business. Jim, Bülent, you want to comment while I check our questions?
Correct. I totally agree with what you said. Whenever personal information or financial information is the topic, I think security becomes a very important issue. And apart from that, I see that there is a question asking among these three challenges, which is the most critical to focus on first. People may have different takes on this. To me, I think the first one is the availability and the quality of data, because if there is no data, there is nothing to talk about. That's the first thing, I believe. Then afterwards, obviously, how you manage this, how you combine, merge, and use the data. And obviously, once you got information or so to say wisdom out of that data, how are you going to secure that wisdom? This is my ranking among these three topics. Everyone may have different approaches. You may start with, oh, I need to be secure first, then I will look at, and so on. There may be different challenges, there may be different takes on. All of them are actually important, but when it comes to machine learning, I think if there is no data, then there is no machine learning.
Right. I mean, I think if you go away with one message from this, it's data first. That if you prepare your data, you work on your data, you organize your data, you will have successful AI projects. And to be in that habit of really understanding how to use data best in your organization and how to prepare it, that's going to be a winning solution.
Yeah, you want to build that funnel of projects. You don't want to build a single project and then end it and said, oh, we did AI, we did a project. You want to build an ecosystem. So that's what we're trying to harness. I mean, if you were a manufacturer, you could probably figure out and do an AI project on the manufacturing floor to look at blemishes or something like that and say you're doing AI, and building a data collection system, but it's a one-off point source type of thing. Even in the finance world, you could do a one-off project on automating contracts, like we'll talk about later. But what you'll find when you try to do something like contracts, you'll find out that the data of your current contracts is not stored in a format that is easily digestible from an electronics perspective and a data analytics perspective. So, you got to crawl, walk, run. You could build that whole system and get it up and running, but then the question is, what do you do next? And how does that tie into all your other initiatives? The one thing that we didn't talk a lot about at the beginning is, what is your overall company strategy? What is your growth? Are you high growth VC, or are you a large company where you're growing at much slower rates because you've hit your critical size? So if you're startup VC, your answers are completely different on what you're going to focus on than if you're a larger company of 10,000 people or so.
Right. Right. And your data problems will be different, very different.
Completely different. So that leads us into the first real polling question here. See, you want to take us through?
Sure. If we go back to our pollev.com/JimDeVries073, what is your top challenge in your organization in deploying AI? A, not sure if the problem is applicable to AI. B, too expensive to solve with AI, not sure what your return on investment will be. C, your organization has a fear of losing control / the security of the data. D, concerned that there is not a way to economically collect the right data. E, none of the above. And F, if you have any other ideas, please write it in the chat window or in the Q&A and just put F for other. Okay, let's take a minute to answer.
Fantastic. We have a few responses in there. So from your experience, Bülent, what are you seeing as some of the top challenges in deploying AI with your recent clients?
It's the data.
I think I agree with Carol on that one. I think that the first one, most of the time we see is whether the problem is solvable. What is the benefit? I think that's the prime importance. What is the benefit and how much will that cost? These two problems or challenges, or basically the questions, I should not be saying them problems or challenges. These are just the questions we usually came across, because most of our clients would like to know, what is the benefit when I just apply this, and how much will that cost, and how long will that take? I think these are the main questions that we usually see. That depends on the problem, again, because no problem resembles the other one. Every problem should be treated differently. But what we do see is, if you do not really know whether your problem is solvable with AI, I think the best thing is to consult someone who can tell you whether the applicable algorithms are suitable for that particular problem or not. And they can actually easily tell you how long will that take, and what kind of resources do you need to solve that problem. When you just put all these three ingredients of a successful project, to my perspective, then you will find your answers even before you start tackling with your problem physically.
Yeah. I think that whether you're, well, there's a big difference if you're a young, smaller company or a larger company, because when we talk to smaller companies, they know right away, this is what I want to do. And then they say, but can I do it? Because we don't have that much data. So then their challenge is, how do they supplement the data they have, or how do they collect enough data to begin their journey? And there's usually a way, but younger companies, they just get it. And I think it's because when they raise money, they were probably asked from the get-go, what data are you going to use to make your company better than the next one in your field? right? Because there's no way to raise money from outsiders today without answering that question. And if you answer that question well, you'll get a pretty decent valuation. And if you don't, you probably won't get much money.
Yeah, they're
Because,
scrutinized a lot
yeah.
more.
yeah.
Correct.
Old
Correct.
companies, it's more challenging. They have
Yes.
data. You're not sure it's good enough for the challenge, but it's much more confusing to them how to select the best option.
Yeah, it's interesting to me that, you know, the number one area is not sure if the problem is applicable to AI. So are we searching to apply AI in a problem area, or, which comes first, the problem or AI? And to me, the problem has to come first, and then find out what are the tools you need it. And if AI is the answer, then it should then be AI. And so you really have to understand your company quite well if you've done some kind of strategic planning ahead of time and saying, these are my top strategic initiatives, and these are the things we're focusing on. And then this is the data we have, and then what can we solve with the data that we have, and then what AI problems fit into that. I think if you put that ahead of yourselves, you're going to be better off than just searching for an AI project.
Here's a good question for you, Bülent. Someone is asking, are the problems you solve for clients unique, or have you built products that scale across?
Both.
Yeah.
There are some problems that we have tackled with that are unique to clients, and we are really working on some automation projects currently that are extremely customer specific, and depending on their needs, I don't think that anyone else is going to be benefiting from them. But there are other projects that we are working with, mostly in business and financial area, basically invoice automation or demand forecast or time series analysis. These are, although there are some specific challenges of our clients, these are really general questions and general ideas, because any company that is selling in store or online that would like to figure out the demand of their products, they would like to track the sales and all these associated parameters. So these kind of problems, time series, demand forecasting, price optimization, price elasticity, all these problems, including payment processing, just fraud detection, all these problems are general problems. Once you solve that problem for one particular client, then you have an understanding how to apply that experience that you have gained for other clients, and these are scalable. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, and I would add that typically for those problems, we're starting with open source algorithms and then customizing them for the client. But there are a lot of choices because these are very common problems. One tool that we've developed at Fuse, we call it Fuse Extract, and it's basically to extract data from invoices. And every company has a problem, right, with invoices, right? But the way our system works is we take each company's invoice is a unique data set, right? And so we takes us about a week, 10 days at the most, to bring that invoice into our system, and then the client, uses it automatically. So there's a bit of customization, but there's a general solution that we're using for invoices in general. I hope that helps. And but then there are some things that we're doing that are, you might say, groundbreaking, where we're doing things that haven't quite been done in exactly that way before. So that stuff's really exciting. And when we do work for clients, the clients own the IP. So, and in fact, a number of clients have filed for patents on the work that we've done, and we help them because, we're just acting as, being part of the client organization when we're doing this work.
Great.
Yes,
So
great.
I'm going to move on just a bit. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because we've spent a lot of time on data. Just a quick reference, Tom Davenport, Google it, Enterprise Information Management. If you haven't set up your data governance, set it up, build it out. But I really want to get on to these slides here. So
Sure.
Bülent, you want to on the application. So Bülent, go ahead.
I will quickly go over these things, and many of them we have already mentioned. There's so many different areas that we would like to help to business, and businesses would like to benefit from AI. The first thing that we see here is just the NLP applications that is associated with chat boxes. I think chat boxes are just to-go applications now for any application, mobile or website that is related with customer support. And obviously, when you try to support your customers, you would like to figure out whether your customers are happy with you or not. That is actually somehow intertwined with the next box over here, the customer retention, because you would like to measure the sentiment of how you are being perceived by the client. And that's actually a very important thing, because if you know how they perceive you, then you can act accordingly. Maybe you are doing some things wrong, then you correct them. Maybe you are doing something correct, then you keep them. So that's a very important information regarding the customers. I think this is very important, apart from automating anything. And in these fields at the top box, we do see machine learning, natural language processing, computer vision, and that is coupled with deep learning. They are all useful areas that we use. And risk profile of customers is one of the very interesting things, especially in business, when it just comes to insurance and underwriting. You really need to figure out the risk. You need to calculate the risk. And obviously, fraud detection is just one of the most important things. As everything is becoming digital and online, we need to be more aware about the fraud and that kind of things that can be addressed using machine learning. Computer vision is just coming into play a lot more, because you're just scanning the financial documents, you would like to authenticate them, and a lot of other things coming, including the non-fungible tokens and such. So these are all just part of that fraud detection authentication ideas, and that can be addressed quite nicely using machine learning and computer vision algorithms. I think in general, that is the summary of this slide, but we can go into depth of each individual topic if you would like to contact, and you can just send us an email, and we take from there and just discuss your specific needs.
Great, thanks, Bülent. So we have 3 more areas we'll try to cover. I know it's coming at the top of the hour. The second is on contracts and document automation, where of course you can use NLP, computer vision, and deep learning. Pretty straightforward on that. In our webinars, we discussed that particular sequence of events. And underwriting and risk assessment, you're going to have to make, in the beginning, you're going to make those yes/no decisions in underwriting and basic credit risk. But at the end, you're going to get into more of these deep learning kinds of what is the probability that the credit worthiness is there. So it's a very good tool as you grow. So you can grow with that. The automated contract analyzer is a very interesting type of approach using NLP, computer vision, and deep learning. This is a fantastic area to automate your contract management, your pricing, everything from pricing to your terms and conditions, of standardization, reading what you have, understanding what risk you have. And then as you get much more complicated, you can get into using deep learning as the local laws apply. Many contracts are written where the local laws will override even the contracts that you have. So there's a lot of opportunity in that area to apply AI in it. And depending on your business, this may be very important for you. And then go ahead, see?
Yeah, the question is, in using AI for contract analysis and document processing, what are the usual hurdles? So what are the things that people struggle with when they're getting started?
I think there is no standard for contracts. That's the main thing from the perspective of NLP, because Every company can come up with a different contract. Every lawyer can prepare a different contract for you. That's the first thing, because there is no standard. The second thing, as Jim mentioned, regulations may differ from one place to the other, and that simply brings the natural language understanding problems. Not only the natural language processing understanding becomes an issue in that one. And then afterwards, actually, the regular issues of machine learning. But I think these two topics are top when it comes to analyzing documents in terms of contracts.
Thank you.
Okay. So we'll move to the next slide. We're getting to the top of the hour because I think these are pretty powerful slides. See?
Let's go through this quickly. So in the invoice payment application, what are the different tools that you're using? So typically when you're doing the payment for a three-way match, you'd be using machine learning and NLP. When you're doing account mismatch and reconciliation, you'd be using computer vision, machine learning, and NLP. And then when we're talking about secure payments, right, automated secure payments that we all use regularly, encryption is very common. Blockchain is not yet common, but I think over time will be. Blockchain is very powerful and very useful in terms of secure payments. And it is going to come into its own in payments. Right now, it's used for big items, but I think as the cost is reduced, it will be used for smaller and smaller items. That's sort of how I see it. But I think that IBM was working with one food company a couple years ago and using blockchain to track vegetable shipments and fruit shipments, because, when we have, health problems, being able to know which shipment this is from and what farm, it's very, very important. So we've already seen the bigger companies incorporate blockchain very successfully in the health area. And lastly, Jim talked about taxes earlier on today, and the tools being used for taxes would include computer vision, NLP, and deep learning.
Right.
Let's see. We've got a question.
What are the most popular operational transactions using AI in finance? That is the question. That's a very, very good question. And there are so many answers to that one probably. But one thing is the most important one, as we see, and according to my experience, that is there is something, goods or services being sold. There's a dollar value, and the other parameter is the time. If you're going to be measuring how many dollars and when and what time frame, that is the most important operational transaction. So whether you're just sending money or just making a payment or just tracking sales, the most important thing is actually trying to figure out dollar value with respect to time. And that's the most important thing that we need to follow. That's my take on that question. Jim, Carol?
Very good.
Good answer.
Good answer. We could talk about that for an hour.
Yeah,
so
but I mean, it is
perfect answer.
the hour. So I think we should just see if there's anything that we want to get through in the next, 5 minutes before we.
Yeah. So if you don't mind waiting, we'll try to cover the last slide, Bülent.
Well, yes, I think that this somehow wraps up the things. There are so many different areas that we use AI, and one of them is visualization of the transactions that we talk. Obviously, demand forecast and time series, we have talked about them. This is very important. This is probably one of the most important thing in fintech and financial, and that includes algorithmic trading, because we're still tackling with time series. And obviously, you would like to make decisions that whether it's be A/B testing, or whether we should be opening a new store here, whether we should be taking this action or that. And decision making is one of the most important things. There's so many different algorithms and approaches in decision making that involves machine learning, and especially expert systems. I think that's another topic, because that's a huge one in terms of how to make a decision. What is the best decision? This is not an easy one. And we have seen in the history that so many companies failed to innovate because of lack of making proper decisions.
Excellent.
Well,
Any
I
more
mean,
questions there?
let's see. No, oh, wait, one question. Let me catch that. No, the same question. It was just typed in two places.
Okay.
But I mean, yeah, I mean, figuring out how to do things operationally is critical.
Yeah,
We
getting
see
it into,
failures all the time.
yeah, I mean, a lot of this, when we talk about neural networks, another buzzword that's out there is digital twin. So once you have your data, we didn't talk much about it today, but once you do have your data that you have in your system, you really want to start getting into that thought process of building a digital twin in which you can start feeding off of it and start building these things on. So there's, if you're an SAP shop, like an SAP HANA, building a digital twin of your data sources is one of the first things you want to do to prepare yourself. So once you've built that, then you can start pinging that without, having detriments to your daily business. And you can update that every hour, every 5 minutes, or once a day, whatever you need in order to make your decisions. This all links to your decision making in your company and helping you make better decisions, but it needs to align to your cadence in your company.
Okay.
So there's one last ranking question here on the importance of the following applications. There's a lot on this slide. So C, do you want to take us through this?
Well, I'll read it through while people go to pollev.com/JimDeVries073. A, what's rank in order of importance the following application areas in your mind? Customer support retention. That's A. B, automated secure payment. C, document automation and automated contract analyzer. D, risk profile of customers, underwriter and credit risk assessment. E, transaction visualization. F, demand forecast, price elasticity and algorithmic trading. G, fraud detection. H, payment three-way match, account mismatch reconciliation. I, corporate and transactional taxes, and other, J. But I mean, obviously, the importance has to do with the kind of business you're in, and that's going to make the difference. If you're a trader, it's going to be very, very different than, if you're a bank,
Yeah, or a large corporation managing transactions. I mean, the three-way match issue is actually a very common issue in most businesses and supply chain.
Right.
Right.
And that's today front and center for a lot of companies. In banking, fraud detection, I mean, we could have a whole discussion of the interplay between fraud detection and blockchain and all the new coins. I mean, these are very interesting discussions to see how you can do what we have been doing and continue on that issue of know your customer, right? But yet let the new things develop that we want to develop in the coin world. So very interesting and probably worth a whole discussion.
Yeah, and you can, a little bit different, but kind of aligned a bit, but is the whole concept of, risk of making a transaction based on credit. A lot of transactions don't go through because of harsh credit requirements, and you're losing volume because of that. And coming up with something more robust on that.
Small loans, I mean, that's been going through a transformation using new techniques. A lot of companies that offer small loans to smaller businesses have changed their methodology and are using a lot of AI to determine who they want to lend to and how much, where they used to use standard credit models, and they're not doing that anymore. And they're lending a lot more freely. That may end up being good or bad, I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm just the value judgment there. I'm just
Yeah.
saying that there's been a real change, and companies that are issuing small loans have definitely leaned heavily on AI.
Yeah, the whole concept of risk and how we manage credit risk is
Right.
evolving
Yeah.
at a very fast rate, as you mentioned. That's a great example of where AI will really literally change our world. And we don't even know it. It's happening right behind us.
Yeah, and it's scary, and people have pointed out the problems with it because, what we've all learned for as long as we've been going to school, if your data is flawed, everything is flawed, right? And you have to look at how you're collecting your data. And if you are, we can go back and say when they used to only collect data on white men for healthcare studies. How bizarre is that today? But it was going on for decades. They didn't use women to do any healthcare studies, okay? So people are looking today about how they're lending, and are they collecting data appropriately across men and women? And women have changed their names, and applied and gotten a loan where when they used their real name didn't.
Yeah.
So, there definitely are issues that we're trying to improve upon.
Before we close it out, are there any more questions that we have?
Yeah, there's one question. No, we answered it.
Okay, great. Well, we really want to thank everyone for joining us today and participating. We really enjoyed the discussion. This is a rich area with lots of opportunities, as we can see. I just want to just close it out just real quickly. We've seen the AI ecosystem slide before. It's another topic of, again, getting the right data, the right algorithm aligned to your AI ecosystem is key. And just closing it out, we do have upcoming webinars, and we welcome you to come and join us. And we really thank you for your time today. We wish you all the best and success in building a successful AI ecosystem.
Yep.
We'll see.
Yeah, I was going to say we'll return. Probably we won't do our next AI webinar till 2022 because the holiday season has so many demands on people. But if you have any questions in the meantime, you know how to reach us, and we'll definitely answer your questions.
Thank you for joining. I hope it was useful.
Have a great day.
Take care. Bye-bye.